Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell, CRNA. Welcome back to this week's episode. So this week, we're going to talk about how do I know I want to be a CRNA? Or what should you be asking yourself when questioning whether CRNA is the right career path for you? So I have a lot of students who are very early on in their journey or still in nursing school. And if you're like me, you just hear everyone talk, oh, that's, the best career in nursing is nurse anesthesia. It's the cream of the crop. It's the hardest, most competitive thing to get into. It's the best, whatever. I've heard a lot of those types of words being thrown around. However, when assessing whether or not you truly want to be a CRNA, I would put blinders onto that, meaning I wouldn't say, okay, well, I know they make a lot of money. This must be the best. This is going to be the best career for me. You really have to, even though, yes, that's a big perk. We do make good money for what we do, but there's a lot of other things to making money, that come with job satisfaction. Okay. So I really want you to put the blinders on as far as what everyone else is saying, especially sometimes too, it can even be the naysayers, meaning, well, I heard you have to be a straight A student to do that. Blinders, don't listen to that. I heard that it's super hard and it'll wreck your life. You'll get a divorce and all other things. Blinders. You don't have to listen to that. And so I encourage you, when you're assessing your own path, your own journey, is to take it from your own approach, meaning don't take someone else's expectations or thoughts or fears and apply it to your own situation. I encourage you to come up with your own thoughts and feelings around whether CRNA is for you, because what I can tell you is that if you truly find this is the career path that you're destined and it speaks to your soul, you're not going to let any of these roadblocks stand in your way. You're going to find a way to make it work. And really, one of the most important pieces of this entire puzzle is to really start planning early. The sooner you can start planning on making this a reality, meaning the sooner you can commit to becoming a CRNA, the easier your path is going to be. The reason for this is because you can miss a lot of detours or a lot of speed bumps along the way if you really plan well for it. Okay. You're not going to have as much last minute making up to do. Okay. And probably one of the biggest mistakes I see students make, and they say it all the time, was, I thought this was it for me. Meaning I thought nursing was my only thing. I was only going to get my nursing degree and that was it for me. I don't want to go back to any more schooling. I was done with school. I didn't think I ever would want to pursue a higher degree. And so by having that mentality early on, you really limit yourself and your possibilities. I'm not just speaking to CRNA. I'm speaking to any advanced practice role. If you go into your nursing career as the expectation is this is it for me, you are closing the doors on so many opportunities for you later on. And I promise you, life changes. Just because you think that way now does not mean in 10 years, you're going to be a totally different person. I mean, I know I could speak myself 10 years ago. I am way different now. And not in a bad or good way, just different. I mean, I've probably picked up some bad habits along the way, and I've probably picked up some good habits. I'd like to think I've improved overall. I know maturity wise, I've definitely improved, but I think what for me, when I think back to the way I was when I was 20 to the way I am now, what has improved the most in a positive way is that I'm way less selfish. And I don't mean that in a mean way. Please don't take this in a mean way. And I'm speaking to myself, thinking about to what I cared about back then. It was a lot about what was for me. And what I care about more now is what I do for others and what I provide for my family. That's actually what drives me more than anything, is how I can provide for my family and who I am as a person, how I show up for others. And that takes selfishness. Don't get me wrong. For you to show up for others, you have to be in tune with what you need for yourself. That is number one, meaning if you don't care for yourself, you will not be able to be there for someone else. And, if you're an ICU nurse, you know this because you see families suffer in this realm. You see them show up for their loved one at the bedside, and yet they haven't showered in a week. They haven't slept for a week, and they can't even emotionally be there for their loved one who's critically sick because they have lacked self-care. So you know how important self-care is. I'm not saying at all, but when I'm saying maturity wise, I had a much more inward focus long-term than I do now. My focus, don't get me wrong, I still focus on myself, but I have my overall big picture is a lot more broad, is a lot more spread out, and a lot more all-encompassing when it comes to looking at what I could do to make an impact in the world. And what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want people to remember me by? And to me, that I want people to remember me for not just what I do for myself, but for what I do for them. That to me is making an impact. And so that is how maybe I didn't even think that way essentially when I was 20. I don't even know if I had the capacity to think that way when I was 20. And so I encourage you not to shut the doors early and to try your best to be a good student and learn early on how to be a good student, because you never know where you're going to be 10, 15 years from now. You could totally take a different direction in your life altogether. And so just want to give you guys my mother spiel on that. So that's my number one piece of advice is you don't have to know CRNAs for you early on, but be open to the possibility such that you apply yourself in school to allow yourself opportunities for growth later on in life. It does not mean if that has already been your case, if you have already dug your hole, that you can't climb your way out, because you sure can. I'm just letting you know from experience, the students that I see, that they're great CRNAs, they're great students. They just unfortunately didn't have that direction or that guidance early on, and it left them a much harder path to deal with later on when it came to pursuing CRNA. And it probably applies to other advanced nurse practice roles. So I want to make sure I give you that mother hen speech. But okay, so how do you know CRNA is for you? This is like kind of an underlying question. Well, I'm interested. I think it sounds cool. I like all the autonomy they have, and their pay is really cool. Like they just have a lot of respect. Like I think I want to do this. So how do you really know you want to do this? And I will say it till I'm blue in the face. And I always encourage people to shadow. However, due to our circumstances with, germs, and I'm not saying that lightly, don't get me wrong. I'm not undermining or underplaying the severity of this, but just in general with the way things are going, I don't even like saying the word anymore because I feel like it's taboo to ever say the word, but you know what I mean when I say germs. But because of the way things are these days, it's become extremely difficult to get that experience, which is so upsetting and so unfortunate, because that is really one of the best things you can do, is try to put yourself in our shoes by watching us provide anesthesia. So if you can get a shadowing experience, please do not give up on that attempt. Meaning, if you've been turned down 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to get a shadow experience, it doesn't mean you should stop trying. It means seek out other opportunities, whatever, even if it's at a dental clinic, colonoscopy clinic. Sometimes their regulations may be a little more lax because they're not taking inpatients. At least that's kind of been my experience. Hospitals really want to watch who they're bringing in the doors for risk of, exposure and things like that. But if you have outpatient facility where all their patients are going home anyways, they might be more apt to let you shadow in the OR. So just seek out opportunities wherever you can. You can network within the community. That's really a great way to try to open up some doors to get this opportunity. And what I mean by that is going to various conferences at your state level, to attend things like CRNA School Prep Academy Fall Conference, which we just had back in October. So if you're listening to this, we already had our yearly conference, but taking advantage of opportunities like that is a great way to network and to meet other aspiring students. Even other aspiring students, you don't even have to know a current student. If you know other aspiring students from other states, other cities nearby, they may have a contact that they can share with you. So making this connection, making this network is really vital to kind of boost you along the way. So starting that early on, even if you're still a nursing student, is really key to helping you as you progress down this path. But you really need to get a grasp for what we do, is what I'm ultimately saying by the shadow experience, because you don't want to get into school, which is an amazing accomplishment, only to get through some of the didactics and be like, wow, this information I didn't know we had to know all of this. Or maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just know some students are kind of, or maybe the didactics is okay, meaning the actual educational aspect's okay. But then you get to the clinical and you're like, I had no idea that it was going to be this intense, and this is not for me. And so I really encourage you to get that shadow experience so you can physically see yourself in those shoes. I know for me, it really pushed me to actually want this more, because I got lit up. I mean, I got excited. I felt that fire in me, like, okay, this is so cool. I want to be doing that. I need to be doing that. I need this to be my job, and I will not stop at anything. Like, that's how I felt when I was in that OR watching the CRNA do these things. I wanted that to be me. Was I scared? Sure. I was like, gosh, can I really know all that stuff? Can I really do that? Do I really know? Would I ever know how to mix up all those drugs and understand how to dose them all so quickly, as they seem to just effortlessly mix up neosynephrine and push it? And, they didn't even seem to stress them at all. I remember being like, gosh, am I ever going to be that good? Would I ever be that good? And yes, you have plenty of education under your belt and experience to be that good. You will be comfortable as well. And what's beautiful about anesthesia, you're always learning. You never stop learning. So I encourage you, if you are a lifelong learner, if you like to be challenged in that way, you will enjoy anesthesia, because it's a very active career. It's a very mindful career, meaning it's not dull. It's very mentally challenging. Even easy cases are mentally and physically challenging in a sense that not that you're like doing backbreaking work, but it can be, you're always on high alert. Okay. You're always like trying to stay one step ahead because even really simple cases, stuff can go wrong. And then you're on, so then it's game on. You got to take care of the bleeding, you got to stabilize the patient. You got to create an airway, so you can go from being 100% okay and smooth sailing to very quick disaster if you don't intervene. And so that being said, you're always on edge. You're always on a little edge. And if that is bothersome to you, I encourage you to get to the bottom of why that is. And can you put yourself in those types of experiences to get more comfortable? And I will be honest with you guys, that fear of like being that person in the room when the patient codes or being the person who has to clear the airway, that was terrifying to me. Like I remember thinking, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that by myself. But what I did is I put myself in those positions, such as working in that critical care unit, to be exposed to these critical situations where I watched nurses do this in the ICU as a nurse's aide. I saw them come to the bedside when the patient, again, coded or hemorrhaged out or like a GI bleed, for example. Like I watched these nurses as a nurse's aide do these life-saving maneuvers as a nurse. And then I became that as a nurse and I got experience doing that as a nurse. And so, yes, when I first watched as a nursing student, the CRNA do a lot of these things, I remember thinking, gosh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. But I'm like, if I put myself in the situation where I'm going to be uncomfortable, I will learn. They had to do it that same way as they didn't start off knowing how to do all these things, right? We're not born knowing how to provide someone an airway or what drugs to mix up and how to dose them. Like we have to learn all those things. And you are just as capable of learning all those things as I am, as anyone else is. And so give yourself that chance. Don't talk negatively to yourself. That is going to be your biggest hindrance in life. You can be afraid. It's okay. Fear is not bad. Fear actually can make you very vigilant. Fear, think about it. If you're training to jump out of a plane, you better make sure you're vigilant because otherwise you're dead, right? If it's life and death on the line, you can make sure you follow the directions to the T. And so again, yes, our job can be very high stress and yes, it can be life and death sometimes, but it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. It doesn't mean you're not perfectly capable of being trained and being vigilant. And so I ask you, like, is that something that you would feel comfortable with potentially after exposure? Meaning don't write it off. Get the exposure now. If you're a nursing student, go work in the ICU and watch these ICU nurses. And I'll tell you a little story that I used to actually think ICU nursing could not be for me because as a nurse's aide, I would occasionally float to the ICU unit. And every time I did, I felt like I saw a horrific code that scared the living daylights out of me. One of them even they actually collapsed on me. And it was like one of these, I remember it was like kind of almost like a PTSD. Like I don't want anything to do with that. But here I am as a nursing student who went to the OR and I gravitate towards the head of the bed. And I'm like, wow, that's a nurse. Cool. Like, this is awesome. Look what they're doing. This is so awesome. This gets me excited. And, as a kid, I used to watch Discovery Health. I used to always like watching surgery. Maybe I'm a little weird. I don't know, but I never really wanted to have my hands in someone's body, but I liked surgery and I liked the outcomes of surgery. I liked knowing that we could like do all these crazy, amazing things for patients while they're completely asleep and they don't feel anything. It blew my mind. It was always fascinating to me. And it intrigued me and interested me that how does this happen? I want to know how this works. And so I always had that. But I had self-doubt. So I'm telling you and sharing this with you because even if you're early on, I think people kind of limit themselves to possibilities by not doing things like job shadow, but not doing things like investigating the career path and going to conferences and networking because they truly in their mind think that maybe they're not worthy. Maybe they're not capable. And so they don't even give themselves that chance. And I'm telling you, please don't do that. You can be fearful. You can be scared. Again, put yourself in it. Put yourself in more fearful situations. Eventually they become less fearful. The more you jump out of a plane, the more it becomes second nature, right? And you're not as nervous. I'm sure you're always a little nervous. I would be terrified to jump out of a plane and you would never catch me jumping out of a plane. Okay. But I sure as heck will provide anesthesia, and to any patient could be as sick as, they could be hanging on by a thread and I'll still provide their anesthesia. So if it means potentially saving their life, right? So anyhow, just put yourself in the position, I challenge you to be a little uncomfortable with this and to push forward with getting that experience and exposure, because that's going to be really one of the best ways you can kind of judge whether or not this is going to be something that you can see yourself doing. And that could just be talking to a CRNA, listening to my podcast, being a part of my Facebook community, being a part of CRNA School Prep Academy, getting your questions answers, getting the mentorship you need to make that judgment call. Okay. But that being said, and I mentioned this before, but like the high stress nature of it, the ICU is stressful. So, I mean, people are like, oh, but a CRNA is so stressful. Working in the ICU is very stressful as well. So if you can, make do in the ICU, you're going to be just fine anesthesia. And I'd like to say my time in the ICU was a different type of stress that I experienced in school. And my type of stress I experienced as a CRNA is a different type of stress than I experienced as a student. So again, my stress in the medical ICU was very different than my stress that I experienced as a anesthesia student, even more so different than the stress I experienced now as a CRNA. Okay. They're all not fun. However, they're all different and different for their own reasons. And I can tell you right now that I can tolerate them all at different variations and different levels, meaning the stress I experienced in the ICU was like for me, a very emotional stress. And that was very hard for me to actually cope with long-term because it really ate at my soul. And I had a really hard time dealing with seeing all the death and suffering. I had a hard time coping. And looking back, I probably should have really sought out some professional help, considering that was probably one of the hardest times in my life to be working in the ICU and just seeing people die all the time and feeling like I was part of their suffering, And so that was really hard for me. School was hard for me because it was like this mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion, just how can I learn all this stuff so quickly? Like my brain's going to explode kind of stress, right? And also the performance stress as a student. Holy moly, you put yourself under so much pressure to perform good. And so if you even slightly vary, you're just like, you beat yourself up. Oh, I got a B+. I'm a failure. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm terrible, whatever. Or I missed my intubation for the second time in a row, or I couldn't get my A-line for the fifth day in a row. Just you beat yourself up over silly things, really, in the big scheme of things. And so the performance pressure is real. And on top of the academic stress and the clinical stress, it can really, really take a toll on your overall physical health if you don't have good coping mechanisms in place. Stress is a CRNA. Okay. Again, different. But for me, when I first started, it was like, holy moly, I'm on my own. Like, are you sure you want me to go in this case? Okay, cool. Like be on your celly, I'm going to give you a call if I need you. But it was okay. It's funny because I remember being like, gosh, but I remember telling myself, Jenny, you've prepared for this for over 2 years. You're fine. You know what what to do and you know what to think, how to plan for if this happens, then what? Plan for the worst, hope for the best, always be prepared. Try to do as good of an assessment as you can to kind of anticipate what the patient's needs are. You're okay. And I remember I had to talk to myself like that for a while when I was brand new. And I remember they approached me to join the open heart team after like 6 months of experience and to do OB overnight when there was pretty much only 2 other providers in the entire level 1 trauma hospital. And I'm like, are you serious? Like I only have 6 months, not less than 6 months of experience as a CRNA. And I remember the CRNA that told me this was like, you'll hit the ground running, you'll be fine. And I'm like, he's right. Because the more you, again, put yourself in these uncomfortable situations and force yourself to do something, even if you're a little fearful, you will learn and you will learn quickly. And so I did. I put myself in that situation. I learned, I loved it. I actually really loved open heart anesthesia. I loved doing OB. I love and hate, I should say. I really liked OB when it was great, but it was also like one of those things where sometimes it wasn't so great. But it was a great experience. It really, again, helped me get more comfortable with my own skill set very, very quickly. And so the stress being a CRNA is more about like, okay, the fear of the unknown, the fear of never experiencing this before, and kind of being the person that people turn to know what to do, to being at the head of the bed, to essentially know how to delegate and know how to tell people what you need and what you want from them to help the patient. But remember, it's a team effort. You have your surgical team, you have your attending, you have other CRNAs, you have support. You're never truly by yourself. Now, you could be the only anesthesia provider in the building. That can exist. And so that being said, that's a very big responsibility. And again, but you can mentally prepare for that by making sure that you're vigilant, making sure that you take it upon yourself to always be a learner, and making sure you know what you're doing and use your resources. You will always have resources, whether that's a textbook, an app, call a friend, whatever. Like, you're going to have resources. And so you're really truly never doing anything by yourself. You're always going to have some type of resource available to you, whether again, that's even just a textbook, or again, maybe messaging someone, a friend or a coworker. If you're the sole provider, maybe consult someone outside of the hospital. If you have something that's coming in, that's maybe something you haven't dealt with before. I mean, whatever it is. But the only way to build skills, you guys, is to do them. Okay. And so the more you put yourself in positions where you maybe are uncomfortable, that's okay, because you're going to build your skills that way. You're going to learn from all your experiences and then build upon those experiences to learn more and more and more. That's how learning works. Okay. You don't always go into everything knowing everything, but when you expose yourself to learning, you do pick up things and you actually build on old knowledge. And if you continuously do that, there's no limit to what you can learn. And so being a learner, being a lifelong learner is something that I think that CRNAs do possess in them, that, the ones who thrive in this career they love learning. And yes, they do love pathophysiology and pharmacology. I don't think I've ever met a CRNA who literally says, I can't stand pharmacology or pathophysiology. I mean, it's a big part of what we do. So if you physically hate it, and not in the sense that it's hard, don't get me wrong, it's hard. You can like something that's hard. Just because pathophysiology, pharmacology is hard for you does not mean you're not capable of doing it. It's hard for everyone. Okay. It's not easy. It's a big concept to grasp. I'm talking about, like, I physically don't like history, and I don't like writing. Like, I'll just tell you, I don't even enjoy the act of doing it. The act of trying to learn history is so dull to me that it goes in right out. Like, it's like, I just don't care. Like, I don't have any interest in it. Where the pathophysiology, pharmacology, yes, it's hard. It's challenging to learn, but it interests me because it's like, whoa, really cool. Like, that's how that works. Awesome. Like, it excites me to learn about it, even though I'm like, I'm going to probably forget this in 2 seconds and have to reread it 10 million times. I enjoy learning it 10 million times because it interests me. So that's what I mean. Don't be fearful of, I have to be a rock star in chemistry. I got a C in chemistry in college, and it was probably the hardest class I've ever taken in college. And so I did anesthesia school just fine. Okay. You don't have to be a straight A student in some of these hard courses. You just have to want it and like it enough to be able to apply yourself to take on that workload that you're going to experience in school. Something else too is like the teamwork. And I mentioned how, like, okay, yeah, there is a lot of, meaning like you will be in the OR by yourself a lot. Okay. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not the same as working in ICU, is that you're always around your coworkers all the time. You may only see your coworkers intermittently on lunch breaks or in the hallway, honestly, but you still work with either an attending, or whether your model is a supervision model, maybe, you occasionally see your attending in pre-op, whatever, you're still going to have teammates there. You're still going to have people there that you interact with, and you're still going to have someone to phone a friend for some help. You're still going to have teammates. So it is a very team effort. And don't get me wrong, like, yeah, you have your other anesthesia provider that's going to be in the building with you, but you also have your surgical team. And so that's part of teamwork. You have to communicate. Communication's big. You have to enjoy doing that. If you think like, I don't want to talk to anyone all day and just want to sit in my little corner and be completely unbothered, I mean, you're going to have, that's, you have to not mind communicating, and not in a sense that you have to jibber jabber the whole time. In fact, that's actually not good, because if you jibber jabber the whole time, you will not pick up on cues for your patient. You actually need to be more observant and listen than you do to talk. But I'm saying you have to at least enjoy engaging with others in the sense that you're working together as a team to accomplish one goal, which is to care for your patient. Which again, you do as a nurse. So I'm just pointing it out there that typically if you're cool with the way nursing works, you're probably gonna be cool with how anesthesia works. But definitely something to think about, especially if you're really early on in this whole thought process. The responsibility. No one takes this job because they love the stress of responsibility, but it's the rewards that come with the responsibility, such as being able to make someone not even know they had surgery. I mean, how rewarding is that when they say, then when you wake them up and they say, when are we going back for surgery? And you're like, we're actually already done. And they're like, wow, really? I mean, that's really rewarding to be able to know that you're bringing that pain, that comfort, and that they've got through this procedure safely and not and painlessly, essentially. That's a lot of responsibility, but it's very rewarding knowing that you're making a difference in that person's life, that you're saving someone's mother, someone's sister, someone's child. You're making a big impact. And so that part is really rewarding. The responsibility, the stress of it can be obviously stressful. But that's not, you have to, like, the good has to outweigh that. Okay. Meaning the desire to, the goodness that comes out of that responsibility has to outweigh the fear of that responsibility. if you're going to be paralyzed in fear because now you're calling the shots, I mean, and again, this is back to putting yourself in the position to experience those things before you rule it out for you, meaning take on responsibility roles in your hospital and see how you do, see how you like it. Don't just go into this blind with literally no experience. And that's partially why you need the ICU experience, because that's part of the ICU skills, is to be someone who's in a high responsibility role in providing patient care and also dealing with patients who are very sick. And also one other thing I want to point out, this kind of probably sums up the most of it, is like hands-on. If you're someone who maybe enjoys maybe doing things that are less like, that are more like, maybe and then the thing is, you don't have to always be hands-on. You could still be a CRNA and do education or work, maybe get more involved with politics and do more like, get more political involved, like the ANA. There's a whole bunch of things. Like there's even like there's the pain management clinics where you just do, pain injections, or there's ketamine clinics. There's anesthetics where you do like plasma facials and Botox and stuff like that. I mean, there's a wide scope that CRNAs do. It's not just all really sick hospital patients, but it's a lot of hands-on work. So if you like hands-on work, meaning physically doing tasks, then I think this is a good career path for you. So that's just something to keep in mind. But again, there's other avenues. There are a lot of educators who maybe don't spend as much time in the clinical realm, but enjoy more of the teaching. And same with like being politically involved. Maybe they're not in the OR all the time, but maybe now they run an anesthesia business. Maybe they have like an entire surgical site that they run and manage, and they're more of like in that manager role, and they don't spend as much time actually in the OR administering anesthesia. So there are ways to kind of find your little niche within the field, whatever fits you. But I encourage you to kind of ask yourself, do I enjoy being hands-on? Because a good chunk of what most CRNAs do is very hands-on work. All right, so that really sums up like how to decide if CRNA is right for you. But keep in mind, the biggest piece is really throwing yourself into our world and kind of trying to gather an understanding for yourself as far as what our day looks like. CRNA School Prep Academy has a virtual shadow experience that I highly encourage you to check out. But again, just listening to this podcast and tuning in and kind of hearing different topics that I address and talk about is really a really good way to kind of get all this information. But I hope that this helps you guys kind of decipher through some of this confusion, but just never shut the doors on yourself. Give yourself that chance, put yourself in those uncomfortable positions. You will only thank yourself later, I promise. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and until next week, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.